Now let's look at if statements and loops so that we can use them in our functions. We'll start off by looking at if statements. If statements are simple and consist of a condition and what to do if the condition is true or false. Shift enter. So a simple application of the if statement is checking the conditions for an iterative method like the bisection method. So let's say we wanted to evaluate f of a times f of b if a is less than or equal to b. We can program it as such. So let's call our function check. We want a and b as well as the function. Colon equals. Now if, and we said we want to check if a is less than b, then we want to multiply f of a times f of b. And if it's false, it's good practice to put an error message or evaluate another expression if that's what you're trying to do. So an error message, we would just put a string and we'll say to please select an a and b such that a is less than or equal to b. Or sorry, just a is less than b. Shift enter. So now let's give our function a shot. Let's define a function of f and assign to it cos of x. Now let's check that the bisection method will work for initial guesses of 1 and 2 with the function f. Shift enter, and indeed it should. Now let's try an input that would yield the error message. So we know that we'll get the error if a is not less than b. So let's check when a is 1, or sorry, when a is 2 and b is 1. And the same function, shift enter, and indeed we got the error message. We can also add multiple conditions using the AND function. So I'll scroll down so we have more space. Let's define a new function, check2. We want to input a, b, and f. Now this time, we will have AND because we need more than one condition. Now we want to check if a is less than b, and we also want to check if f of a times f of b is less than 0. Now how the AND function works is if even just one of these conditions proves to be false, this whole expression yields false. And what we want to do when it's true is proceed to the next iteration of the bisection method, which sets x1 equal to a plus b divided by 2. And if it's false, we'll print our error message. Here I'll just put that it doesn't work. Shift enter. Now let's try a simple function like g of x equal to x cubed. We'll use check2. We'll check if it works with a equal to -1, b equal to 2, and g. Shift enter. And indeed it should, as it went to the true condition. Now let's try to force this to be false. We know that we just need one of these to be false for the whole thing to be false. So once again, let's set an a that's greater than b. So check2, 2, -1, and g. Shift enter. And once again, as expected, we have the error message. Alright, now that we know how to use if statements, let's move on to using loops. We can use either while loops or for loops. While loops have two inputs. They evaluate a body and a test until the test gives false. For loops have four inputs. They take a starting condition and evaluate an increment and a body until test gives false. Shift enter. Now, a simple way to understand how each loop works is to print values from 1 to 10. So first we'll start off by using while loops. Now, an important thing to look at with while loops is that we don't have a starting condition like we do with the for loop. So this means we have to evaluate the first iteration before the while loop. Now we can initiate the while loop. We want to keep going so long as I is less than or equal to 10. And while I is less than or equal to 10, we want to print I, and then we want to increase I to I plus 1. Now, an important thing to look at here is that we need a semicolon to separate expressions in the body. This is important as if we left the semicolon out and say just separated the print and the I equals I plus 1 with a space, Mathematica sees this as if this is one expression. I'm not going to shift enter because doing so would cause Mathematica to freeze because this while loop would never end. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that semicolon there. Now shift enter. And as expected, we printed all of the values from 1 to 10. Now let's use a for loop. Now we know with the for loop that we do have a starting condition, so we don't have to initiate anything beforehand. So for our first iteration is I equals 1. Then we want to keep going so long as I is equal to or less than 10. And another way to write I equals I plus 1 is just to write I plus plus for the increment. And then we want to print I. So now what this does is it starts off with I equals 1. Then it checks that I is still less than or equal to 10. If so, it increases I, and then it prints I. So once again, I'll scroll up so that we can see the syntax once again. So this is our start, this is our test, this is our increment, and this is our body. Now shift enter, and we get the same result. Alright, now that we've looked at loops and using if statements, We'll look at an example that uses everything that we've learned thus far in the next part of the tutorial.